So first, good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be this morning with you at the Women's Forum and moderating our panel, Refashioning Fashion, Making Ready-to-Wear Sustainable. But first, I would like to introduce our panelists and also to say welcome and thank you for the participation. So first, Peter Lacy, Global Managing Director of Growth, Strategy, Sustainability at Accenture. Elisa Newtoff, Managing Director of BSR. And Rebecca Van Bergen, Founder and Executive Director of NICE. So welcome and thank you. Before starting our conversation, I would like to give you a few words about sustainability in fashion and perhaps the relation we have with the fashion industry. We'll all have a personal relationship with the fashion industry in our panel, but also in the audience, from what we wear and also to the brands we chose to buy. And for some of us, like myself, in the work we do. At the same time, we are also global citizens who would like to make a better world. And when we think, I will say, to the fashion industry, we can think about two sides. We have the dark side. We have to know that it's the second largest polluting industry after oil and gas. It's a driver of climate change. If we think about the supply chain, we have a long history of difficult working conditions. If we think also about some of industry players, they have created what I could like to the concept of a disposable lifestyle. And to end, I will say with the bite side, with all the extra product we buy, we don't need, we create also unnecessary waste. Hopefully, on the other side, we have more and more CEOs, leaders in this industry who are committed to tackle this issue and really who are committing in sustainability. At the same time, we can see also we have an increase in transparency and stakeholder collaboration. And something very important for us, we see also the leaders in the industry that they would like to use innovation to tackle all these issues. So, at the end of the day, when you see the dark side and the bright side, we can say, do you think that we can reconcile the reality of the textile industry with our goal, with our target to make a better world? So that's why, Elisa, after this short introduction, I would like to have, and if you can share your ideas about the fact, can the textile industry really can become sustainable?
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I'm delighted to be here today. And of course, that's a really, really important question. And in order to answer it, there is a really good quote from Henry Ford, which is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. And so I think that we as sustainability professionals, need to stay optimistic, and we can. And I think today I'll talk about a couple of reasons that I think we can, but they're really there are benefits for brands in acting. So because there are benefits, that's a good value proposition for fashion brands. And secondly, we can do it because we have a blueprint and we have a lot of strong ideas about what needs to get done. So first, a little bit about the benefits of acting. So there are many. The first off is profitability. If you are a fashion brand and you want to protect your profitability, then guess what? You need to act, because we know that inputs costs are rising. So whether it's energy, water, cost to process, regulations are making things much more complex. The Global Fashion Agenda and BCG did a study that showed in the coming years, fashion brands are going to lose 3 percentage points of profitability because of this. So if you want to protect your profitability, then start working on sustainability. Another very, very strong reason that we've seen, and we see it all the time, is that sustainability really protects your brand value and your brand reputation. So we know that more sustainable products actually lead to commercial success. Purpose-driven brands lead to better sales. So Unilever, we have that wonderful example in the CPG industry where Unilever's purpose-driven brands are growing at twice the rate. We also see, other examples. We know, for example, that consumers are very interested in sustainability and in sustainable fashion. All of the surveys tell us that they want to buy more responsible products, and I think those surveys are very useful. But I will say that what I think is even better is to have actual sales data. So if we look at actual sales data, consumers are willing to pay a price premium for some responsible products. So BCG analyzed, for example, that in the grocery category, which included a lot of beauty products, Europeans paid 58% more on average in 2015 for responsible consumption products. So again, potentially more sales. Another strong benefit for brands is around employee engagement, employee talent attraction. Millennials want to work for responsible employers. 62% of millennials will take a pay cut to do so. And over half of employees say that they will work harder if what they're doing makes a difference to people. So as an employer, if you're a fashion brand and you are involved in work that is meaningful, your employees will be more engaged and more productive. I think that's a fantastic benefit. And then lastly, working on sustainability also enables you to bring new innovative products to market and to innovate in your processes. So we take the example of Levi's waterless jeans, which used a lot less water, in the manufacturing process. They had higher sell-through rates than their traditional jeans at a very similar price point. So all of this means that we're already getting a lot of amazing benefits to ACT. And the second big reason that I think fashion can be sustainable is because we've got a blueprint. So we have so many people who are working on these issues. I'm thinking particularly of the global fashion agenda. There's a blueprint for change. There's a landscape for change, which has actions in it, which are both immediate actions, which are ready now, and there's also sort of longer term actions that require collaboration, which we'll be talking about in a bit with Peter, collaboration and innovation. But we know what needs to get done, and I think brands are diving in and doing, that really hard work. So at BSR, we're doing a lot of that hard work every day, whether it's working on better sourcing in terms of improved welfare practices on animal skins, animal welfare, whether it's empowering women in factories, whether it's helping to make wages digital instead of cash, which we're doing with the Gates Foundation. So there's lots of things that we're doing and we need to continue doing.
Yes, perhaps you know that we like speaking about sustainability, but we prefer to act when we are in sustainability. So can you share with us perhaps a few examples of very practical things that the company can do and can implement after this session?
Absolutely. So like you, yes, it's super important to get, we have to get our hands dirty, we have to act. As a fashion brand, I would say there's 3 things that you can do. First, set your goals, your vision, your target. So you need to be organized with your vision, what you're striving for. Set your targets in accordance with international norms and guidance. So set your science-based climate targets. Look to the women's empowerment principles for the blueprints on what you need to do, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So all of that exists out there and needs to happen. I would say that the second thing that's really important in the industry, which of course Rebecca will be talking more about, is empower women. Women are 68% of textile workers. There is lots that we can do in terms of improving access to childcare, making workplaces safer. At BSR, we've just released a lot of reports, very specific guidelines about workplace safety, helping to end violence against women, helping to increase wages. So there's a lot of practical guidance, I would say, already out there. And the last thing that you can do is collaborate. Collaborate both internally and externally. Internally, it's super important, as I think as sustainability professionals, we can sometimes let ourselves get siloed, or we're working with the CEO, we're working with procurement, which makes sense, but we need to really be working with brand owners, with designers, with marketers, because they're the ones who are controlling products and communications to consumers. And of course, we need to collaborate externally. So in the fashion industry now, there's huge momentum with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, with the Global Fashion Agenda. I encourage all of the fashion brands working on these issues to, jump into those movements, to leverage the work that's going on. Also encourage you, of course, to join BSR's Responsible Luxury Initiative with Kering, where we're working on animal welfare issues, among other issues.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Now, with Peter, we will move to another world, the world of innovation. So, Peter, you have a specific expertise in innovation and in circular economy. Do you think that innovation can help make a positive difference in the textile industry?
Yes, and we see at Accenture a $4.5 trillion global opportunity for industry.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Somewhere in the region of 4%, 5% of the global economy. We see a huge opportunity for firms to go after circular economy, and I think there's a huge opportunity for textiles, for fashion, for luxury industries as well in that space. I think it's worth just saying what we mean by a circular economy. If you think of the circular economy, it plays out at two levels. At the macro level, it's about decoupling our global economy from the things we want. We want wealth creation, we want jobs, we want well-being, from the things we don't want. We don't want the harmful use of scarce natural resources, whether that's energy, water, materials, or whether or not that's the contribution to climate change and carbon. So the question is how we decouple that, and that's really the concept and the innovation behind the circular economy. Now, then you boil it down to, okay, you mentioned quite rightly, it's about action, not about theory. And you say, well, how do you make that real for a company? And making it real for a company means bringing it down to the point where you are able to decouple your product or your service and the value you deliver to the customer from that scarce or harmful use of natural resources. That's really what we're talking about with circular economy. And it's a great starting point for firms to think about innovation. Innovation of product, innovation of business models, innovation of process, and indeed from a collaboration perspective, innovation of your ecosystem. It's very difficult to go it alone if you want to be successful in driving circular economy. Now, I would just say a couple of things that are very relevant to the fashion industry, to the textiles industry, which is, for me, there are two key levers, if you like, that I think help to realize the full potential and the value of the circular economy. Not just to drive sustainability benefits, environmental, social governance benefits, but as core business, as a way to think about growth, profitability, and sustainability, integrated into the core, not sustainability or responsible ethical business.
Sustainability is not philanthropy.
Exactly. It's not even corporate social responsibility. It's the way we think about strategy, the way we think about our core business, the way we think about our product. And the two things I think that have been most successful for firms in really realizing that value have been a shift in business models, innovative new business models, and also the application of the next generation of technologies that we're seeing emerge. Some call it the fourth industrial revolution. There's lots of names for it. But if you look at the extraordinary pace of change in digital technologies, in physical materials and the way in which bioscience is playing out, and even in human genomics, we're seeing a real industrial revolution taking place that can be applied to circular economy and can actually drive new growth, new models, but also drive out sustainability. Now, the business models are interesting. When we looked at 6,000 companies around the world and we drilled down into the 100 companies that have been most successful innovating in circular economy, what we found was 5 different shifts in business models, from linear supply chains to circular supply chains, from thinking about product as a traditional product where I sell you the product and I wave goodbye to the product forever, to the idea of product as a service, as a relationship. The third is around the sharing economy, people moving into shared models of consumption and use of products. The fourth is about recovery and recycling. And the final model is really about the collaborative ecosystem and the shared infrastructure and the shared relationship in supply chains between different businesses. And those are really, I think, what realizes this $4.5 trillion opportunity. And I would agree entirely with Elisa's point that actually what we're seeing is 91% of consumers saying that they would prefer to buy a responsible, ethical, or sustainable product or service. We're seeing 61% of global consumers saying that they would actively not buy a product or service based on its performance. 2/3 of the next generation of Generation X, Y, Z saying that this matters, their values matter in terms of where they want to go next, in terms of their career and how they want to work somewhere where they think their values are respected. Or, exactly as you said, the fact that not only do we see a price premium for many of these products, we also see that on average, these categories, ethical and sustainable categories, are growing at approximately 3 times the rate of the rest of the market. So circular economy and sustainability is a big opportunity for fashion.
Thank you. Congratulations. Perhaps, could you share with us 2 companies that put in place very operationally what you mentioned previously? So not, of course, Kering, because we try to do that, of course, but other companies.
Well, I'll give you 2 or 3 very quickly. I think some of the work that you've done, for example, in Adidas is phenomenal. You know, the Ultra Boost shoes in Adidas, you know, where I think you're now up to 11 recycled bottles per pair of shoes, fastest seller in the US, 54%. So, you know, credit to you. I think you are doing some very interesting things. A couple of examples. I mentioned the sharing economy and how that can impact fashion and luxury. You know, the Rent the Runway business model, I mentioned innovation of business models, is a phenomenal new business model that is taking tens of thousands of very high-end, high couture fashion and actually using it as a way for people to share the use of that. Perhaps they only need it for one event. Perhaps they want to use it for a week rather than actually having it sit in a wardrobe. That's a business now that has $100 million a year in revenue, has $600 million worth of funding, and can be fundamentally disruptive to the way the fashion business model works. But actually, what it's giving people, for a circular economy perspective, is the product or service that they want and the value at a lower cost, and we need less garments and less materials to deliver that value to the customer or consumer. So that would be one good example for me. A second example would be for, to take H&M. You talked about collaboration and the ecosystem. H&M has created a global award to bring together different small and medium-sized enterprises with the technology innovations or the process innovations or business model innovations to reshape their supply chain. It's $1 million a year prize, not just to give them the money, but then to work with H&M and actually to be part of that future supply chain. And then the very last one I'll give you, they always say that you are what you wear in fashion. So I don't know if you can see these cufflinks and the belt. So this is a great example of upcycling. So these were fire hoses in the London Fire Brigade until they became part of my wardrobe. I think what's lovely about this is it's about upcycling.
Sure, also on this side.
Yes, so here you've got so the thing I like about it is, typically when we think about recycled materials, people think, well, that's not very fashionable, it's not very aspirational, you know, it's something that's already been used. This has a brilliant story. This may have saved someone's life at some point. This is 20 or 30 years in the fire brigade. They're actually very expensive, so there's a very high margin on them, which you know, I'm sort of the elastic consumer that bought them. But it's a good example of how we can reframe and rethink about aspirational fashion, and hopefully an example of acting as well as thinking about circular economy.
Thank you so much. Now, let's move to you, Rebecca. We said a few minutes ago that collaboration, working with a stakeholder is very key. So with your own experience, Rebecca, how do you think stakeholder engagement can help drive this kind of changes? Again, very operationally, if it's possible.
Sure. And I think it's so important because the problems are complex and huge, whether it's the environment or factories. The industry is facing enormous uphill battles in some way, and so I think collaboration is the only way we'll get there, and stakeholder engagement is a big piece of that. Specifically, Nest works, I think when most people think of sustainability, they think of either circular economy and upcycling or factory work. But I think most consumers don't realize that a full half of the clothing that we're all wearing are not actually fully made in regulated factories. They're subcontracted legally or illegally to women in their homes to do either high skill work like adding embellishment and beading, or lower skill manual labor, whether it's sewing soles on shoes or ironing and packaging and putting in poly bags. And so there's hundreds of millions, literally, of women in the informal economy that are part of global supply chains, and they're operating in their homes. And so they're paid cash, which means there's no ability to make sure that they're paid fairly or paid at all. So they're considered the lowest paid members of the textile world. In India, it's about $1.80 a day. They're also unregulated facilities, their homes, and so there's no way to ensure their safety or their health and well-being. But working in your home has a lot of benefits, as many of the women, and I'm a mother, know that you can care for your children and your dependents. If you're rural, you don't have to move to a city and live in a dormitory to work at a factory. The Economist just released a study that they did in India where 70% of Indian women, it was a national survey, so not caste-specific and not regional, felt unsafe working outside of their home. 70% of Indian women. That's an amazing statistic. And if that's true, how are we providing them safe and employment that works for them as women? And so we've launched an initiative to help bring compliance systems and visibility tools to that informal workforce outside of factories. And I think it's a really great and very tangible example of where you need stakeholder engagement. Obviously, we need corporate involvement. We need companies willing to expand their visibility to this pool of workers. We need government and multilateral partners to look at their labor laws, strengthen them, make them gender appropriate, and then enforce them. And then we also need the artisan businesses themselves, the factories and the workers, to be engaged and see the value of pay transparency, going digital instead of cash-based payments, and a whole host of innovations. And so I think it really does. And then we need consumers. We need people driving this change and demanding products and visibility and transparency, and helping push companies and governments in the right direction. And so I think it really will take all of us. And I think that what's been so exciting for us as an organization is seeing how collaborative companies are. I think we think of brands as being competitive and a bit siloed in their approach, and it's the total opposite case in the sustainability world, as I'm sure everyone here knows. But we have a team of brands who have all collaborated and are co-creating sets of standards. BSR does as well, I know, and so I think it's really exciting to see that the coming together to demand change is great.
So thank you, Rebecca. And as you know, in our fashion industry world, we have, I will say, two specific stakeholders: local communities and also artisans. And artisans are key because we need to keep alive, I will say, their skill if we want to continue the business. So what we can do, again, very concretely, very operationally, to support them?
Sure. I think we're really excited about expanding ideas of circularity from product reuse to humans. I think the better we can connect workers and consumers, the better everyone will be. I think we've seen in artisan communities all around the world that women would often rather work in a call center or pull a rickshaw because they're learning English and they're connected to the global community. So the more they feel that their craft and their skill set is valued by a global consumer, the more likely they are to want to participate in it. And so we've really seen when the feedback loop gets connected, so they get to see their product on the runway in a magazine, and not just as the panel of cloth that they submitted to the factory to be turned into a garment, the more excited they are. And I think the same is true for consumers. I think as things become highly mechanized, people are enthralled by the idea of hand production. And even if it means it was just a woman who folded and ironed the clothes before they got to you, to know that that was a woman and not a machine, to me is really appealing if you know that she was paid well. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity for companies to help connect that loop, and it will take companies being willing to storytell and bring their consumers on the journey of how products get to the shelf to do that.
Okay, thank you. So now we will open the conversation with the audience, but before I would like to have a kind of comment, testimony of Precious Moloi Motsepe. She's the founder and CEO of Africa Fashion International, and because also it's the Women's Forum, it will be nice to have your comment. I don't see you, but I'm sure. Okay, great. What can we do for women link with the local community? Perhaps you can share your own experience and a few quick comments, please.
Yes, thank you very much. As you have all said, the fashion industry is very labor intensive. It's an industry that absorbs a lot of skilled and unskilled labor. And we know that the majority of people that work in the industry are women, from small-scale farmers who produce cotton, to your weavers, to the seamstresses, the models who walk on the runway, designers themselves. So I think it's imperative and important for companies to look across the value chain and empower women within the industry through collaborations and partnerships that are very important to women. We need to expand opportunities for these women to access markets and as well as to be able to bring their wares to the marketplace. I think it's also important that we consider fair labor practices. It's a point that has been spoken about quite often within our own companies, but also to look at our supply chain to ensure that the companies that we source from support women in terms of fair wages, in terms of proper working environments, but also in terms of ensuring that there is gender and diversity within their companies. And lastly, I think coming from a developing nation, I think it's important for companies to also be very conscious of how they repurpose or recycle their products. We have found that in many countries on the continent, local production, local knowledge, and local know-how gets compromised or killed because of the way other big companies globally recycle their products.
Thank you. So now I hope that we will have so many questions to our panelists. Who start? Are you convinced? Yes, thank you so much. It's always the first question that is the most difficult.
Yeah, my question was that, when I think of my mother had like maybe 3 winter coats throughout her entire lifetime, and I have the same amount every season. My name is Nazish. I'm French, sort of. I mean, I'm a mess from all over the world, but lately from Brazil after 17 years there, and now here in Paris, based here in Paris for a 3-year project to launch a Brazilian consumer cosmetics brand here. My question was that, it's kind of like if you stop making, if you stop producing, then so many women lose their jobs, and which is like there's like this ongoing cycle, which is very difficult to stop. Is anybody like thinking of like big solutions, big macro solutions? What are they? We tend to, in my opinion, we tend to like often look at things from a little cut up perspective, but not look at the big picture because there's so many actors in place. I think I'm just rambling now. So.
Okay, thank you. We will try to have a quick question and a quick answer so we can interact, I will say more. So Rebecca, perhaps, and Peter.
You guys probably have ideas too. I think a lot of companies are looking at service provision models. So instead of producing a lot of things, allowing people to come to the store and have things altered, hemmed, changed, adapted in store. So working with seamstresses and really kind of bringing workers into the remaking and reuse of garments as opposed to the creation of new garments, which I know is one that allows for continued employment of workers. I think it's something we think about a lot, but I know you guys probably have ideas too.
I mean, I think the circular economy is really sort of the model that we're all looking to for that innovation and those solutions. And the good thing about the circular economy is that it's not only sort of the environmental factor that's there, but also it's promoting local livelihoods. So part of a circular economy is really that it promotes local employment as well.
I'm not sure if the brand that you're promoting in Paris is Natura, but Natura would be a good example. For example, a Brazilian brand that has begun its life in Brazil, but now is moving into other parts of the world, where it's a good example for this particular issue, because when we think about some of the evolution and changes as a result of production processes of the next generation of technologies, for sure, you do lose jobs as you drive productivity, and you do lose it as you drive new innovations through different value chains like fashion. But what we're also seeing in different parts of the value chains around the world is that gives you a chance to think about what new roles emerge, what new jobs, what new entrepreneurial activities to support that new set of models. And in a business like Natura, rather than focusing on the production process, has actually focused on empowering 1 million plus women as the sales agents of their cosmetic products in places like Brazil. So that higher touch, higher customer thing that actually you can't automate. You can't automate that connection between people and that sales channel, that conversation between different women. So I think it's about thinking about how you drive productivity and gains in certain parts of an industry, but how you drive higher touch, greater experiences in others, and how that creates new jobs.
Other question? I see. Yes, sir? On my right and after on my left.
Hello, I'm Beloria Williams. I'm with Barry Callebaut. This is a question about, I know there's a really big push, especially in the US, that's where I'm based, on plus size fashion and size inclusion. And I'm just kind of curious because I understand in the past it had been, where there were only certain sizes, and I think a lot of that has to do with production and all of that. But now with this big push, I'm just wondering how will the fashion industry adjust to that, and then how is that going to affect the supply chains? Because you have more sizes, more you have to buy more material and things like that.
Peter, it's for you.
It's
yes.
for me, yeah. No, I think that's right. Look, I think this is about the innovation of process, and this is the innovation that we're seeing in supply chain. We have these extraordinary waves taking place in the industry, in the fashion industry, that are all crashing into each other. On the one hand, you have the rise of interest and demand in things like plus size fashion, but I think that's part of a much broader trend, which is towards personalization and tailorization of every product. Right? And we're able to do that on the demand side because increasingly the channel, increasingly technology and the apps and the cloud and everything allow us to be much more closely connected to you as an individual rather than as a generic consumer. And the question is how, as successful businesses, we go about then innovating the supply chain in order to be able to deliver that for you, whether that's an Adidas or a Nike tailoring your sneaker or your trainer so that it comes to you. Now, the interesting point, which is exactly right, is can we, in the process of that tailorization, embed principles like circular economy, like fair labor practices, so that it does not become the compromise as we look to move towards tailorization. And we see good examples of that, where you can go about that, even down to, from a circular economy perspective, things like 3D printing of high-end garments, where you're using local materials and recycled, reused, upcycled waste.
Thank you. The question on this side, yes? If you can introduce yourself very quickly.
Yes, my name is Fei. I work for the joint venture of Fashion in China, which is a publishing house. And my question is, we started to have a trend in China very inspired by the Japanese trend called minimalist, which means less is more, and we even have a fashion movement called 1331. So you have a 31 day and you only use 13 clothes of your closet, and to see what exactly you really need. So do you think that minimalist is the way to go? Do you think this is one of the direction we should take to go to the real sustainability?
Perhaps Elisa, for BSR, I know that you have worked on it, so perhaps.
I think it can be one way to go. I think what's really, really important if we want sustainability to stick in the fashion world is to give consumers what they want. So some consumers will want that, will love it. I think it's a wonderful approach. Others will not. So we need to find solutions that really, satisfy consumers so that sustainability is valuable for all consumers.
So the last question, perfect, on this side. The last question you will have.
Hi, I'm Anna Kali. I'm actually from Sanofi, so completely different industry. I'm based in Japan at the moment. So my questions are actually two, and there is also kind of a comment with it. It was an example, great example, what you are wearing, but how are we going to make it affordable for everybody? Because what's happening today is that if it's not affordable, it's not going to get bought by the mass, right? So, and the second one, how we're going to make it this visible to the others, to the mass, because it's nice to be here, to have this exposure, but we are a selection. So how we're going to make it the educational part?
But we count on you to be an ambassador after. So it's a selection, but all the audience will be an ambassador.
Yes. I think it's a great point. I mean, so, clothing like this, this Elvis and Cress, I mean, this is aspirational, but I think fashion works at different levels. You need to have the iconic, which maybe are going to be much more expensive, maybe unaffordable, but they actually set the tone and they are aspirational for people to understand how sustainability and ethics is built into what it means to be fashionable. So I welcome that, but you're absolutely right. The real story is how you then find a way to ensure that there's no trade-off, because exactly as you said, in fashion we have to give customers what they want, but we want to do it and that means giving it to them in a way that is sustainable, but is also profitable for the business and affordable, as well as drives the kind of growth that we need in businesses. And I think the good thing about circular economy and sustainability is, managed right, actually it's about using less natural resources, which reduces your cost base because you don't have to pay for the materials, you're not wasting the materials, you're getting better talent, so it's about finding the ways to reinforce that into the business model, into the core business model.
Thank you. Sorry, we have to end, I will say, our session. So again, with the spirit to call to action, I will ask you, every one of you, a final question. So, how will you personally dare to lead, to innovate, and to make the textile industry more sustainable? So very concrete, very operational.
I will buy more Elvis and Cress cufflinks.
Okay, Elisa.
I'm passionate about showing luxury executives, fashion executives, that sustainability is desirable. So I'm currently writing a report that we'll publish with Kering and our other brands in the Responsible Luxury Initiative on sustainability and desirability. And we're also continuing all of our work on animal welfare principles.
Thank you. Rebecca?
We're going to continue to advocate and push for visibility to the very last worker in very complex supply chains and make her visible to consumers and to companies.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this informative idea, and thank you for the audience. Please enjoy the rest of the Women's Forum. Thank you so much.